say, for the sake of argument, you're a Democratic president finishing out your last year in office. There's not a lot you're expected to do as a lame duck except endorse a Democrat for the upcoming election, but then early in the year, something unexpected happens. A Supreme Court justice dies suddenly in his sleep. Vacancies in the Supreme Court are infrequent, as it's a lifetime appointment, so death and the occasional resignation are the only causes of an empty seat. And when it happens, it's the president's job to get the seat filled. So you set about the task of picking a successor, probably the last major decision you will make as president, when the Republican Senate tells you, yeah, we're not going to confirm anyone you nominate. And you say, well, if you think you've got the votes, you can reject my nominee and I'll pick someone else. And they say, oh no, we're not going to vote against your nominee. We're not going to hold a vote. What are you talking about? I haven't even nominated someone yet. We're not going to convene a vote on anyone you nominate. But that's your job. I make a nomination, the Senate holds a vote, and democracy decides who sits on the bench. Well, that's not what we're going to do. You're a lame duck. The next president will decide who sits on the Supreme Court. That's not how this works. That's not how we've ever done things. Certainly not when your party's had a lame duck in office. Well, it's what we're going to do. And you say, that's not what the Constitution says. And they say, the Constitution does not explicitly say we can't. Your wife has a saying for when Republicans act up. They go low, we go high. So in considering your current predicament, you try to think of what taking the high road might look like. The Republicans have always accused you of being too far left, so after some deliberation, you select a middle-of-the-road, utterly uncontroversial judge, the kind of candidate a functioning Senate should have no trouble confirming. You make a display of embracing the spirit of compromise, in the hopes they'll change their tune, or at the very least be shamed into convening a vote rather than admitting this had nothing to do with the timing or the nominee and was just about refusing to collaborate with a liberal. In response, the Republicans announced that not only will they still not convene a vote, some say that should a Democrat win the election, and they don't even know who the candidate is yet, they will hold the seat vacant for however long it takes to get a Republican in the White House. You didn't call their bluff. They are all too happy to admit that this is absolutely about dicking over liberals and guaranteeing as many conservatives as possible in the Supreme Court. There is no official policy for what to do if one party simply refuses to do its job. But there is a legal argument that if the Senate refuses to vote on your nominee, they are, in effect, giving you permission to appoint a judge without their approval. Link in the down there part. This is technically a little extra-constitutional, but it is the law in many similar scenarios, and certainly if they're going to break the rules, you're within your rights to bend them. But they go low, we go high. How can you criticize them for going outside the Constitution if you're gonna do it yourself? So, being the grown-up, you grit your teeth and do nothing. Seemingly there's nothing to do but publicly shame them, keeping a running tally of how many days your nomination has sat on senators' desks without a vote. You can play this as keeping your integrity, the Democrats seizing the moral high ground. But in response, the Republicans seize the Supreme Court. Their guy wins the election, you finish out your term, and Republicans will put one of their own on the bench. And just before you leave office, and the new guy is inaugurated, and your nomination expires after 293 days without a vote, nearly 3 times the previous record, a Republican senator predicts that, under the new administration, the Democrats, the minority party in the House, Senate, and now Supreme Court, will be the biggest obstructionists history has ever seen. Think of the position this puts Democratic senators into. They have been preemptively denigrated for the exact behaviors Republicans have relied on for the last 8 years. After 2 terms of misuse, every means of obstructing an unfit executive branch, from filibustering bills to shutting down the government rather than approve a budget proposal, has just been defined as going low. Worse, in the event of a Supreme Court appointment being literally stolen by the opposing party, it might be defensible to not convene a vote on whomever that party nominates, except that's exactly the tactic Democrats have spent 10 months condemning. If everything that might restore democratic norms is tainted by the Republicans who violated those norms in the first place, then the only honorable move left is compliance. Give Republicans whatever they want, confirm their judge as quickly and smoothly as possible, treat the situation like it's fair, because that's what they should have done when it actually was. This is somehow going high. And that comment from the Republican senator belies the truth. They know what they're doing, and they're not ashamed. They know Democrats aren't obstructionists. They're counting on it. When one party can be relied on to do the exact opposite of your worst behavior, good strategy is to do to them as destructively as possible whatever you don't want them to do to you. The new Republican norm is you go high, we go low. Now, this is a long-standing Republican thing, and we'll talk about how the alt-right comes into it by and by. And though it's effective, it's not sophisticated. I mean, I just got finished with my intro and I'm already out of things to say about it. So let's turn the camera around and ask not why the technique is popular, but why Democrats keep falling for it. On the face of it, it would appear Democrats are a lot more concerned with being called hypocrites than Republicans are, which would seem a very solvable problem. Republicans are going to yell so much for the tolerant left, no matter what form our opposition takes, so ignore them. But clearly it's not that simple, or we wouldn't be having this problem. Republicans are striking at something more fundamental to American liberalism that makes these charges of hypocrisy hard to ignore. So, what's wrong with liberals? The modern American Democrat is in an unenviable position. You need two things to win an election: votes and funding. And there are a number of things that voters care passionately about and that they have no hope of ever getting from Republicans, but unfortunately for Democrats, they are the exact things big-ticket donors despise, which is why Democrats in very secure districts who tend to run unopposed are the ones most willing to talk about them. The left is, in fact, a very heterogeneous group with a mountain of conflicting interests and decades of infighting. So it's very hard to appeal to all of them and wealthy donors. Republicans don't have this problem, or at least they don't have it as bad. Despite many, in some ways, even more passionate and fundamental differences, conservatives value loyalty and in-group cohesion. And this keeps them coming together every 4 years in a surprisingly unified voting bloc. It also helps that they fucking hate us, and most would sooner vote for a Republican they despise than any kind of Democrat. And lucky for them, the things conservative voters want are much more aligned with corporate interests. So building a coalition on the left is a lot of work. And faced with this challenge, there is a liberal tendency to turn away from policy and focus instead on process. Generally uncontroversial things like bipartisanship, compromise, decorum, and fair enough, the absence of these things in Washington over the years is certainly something everyone left of center is sick of, but they're not things Democrats can make happen all by themselves. And more to the point, none of them are results. Their means. Like, a willingness to compromise is not a position, and when you over-focus on how you should go about things and not what things you should go about, it fosters a certain philosophy about government that is both highly flawed and highly